Happy Sunday, Conscious Crew. It is your favorite breakdown commentator, CTV. Welcome to another riveting episode of the Consciouztv platform. You already know what we're here to discuss on this riveting Sunday afternoon. But before we do so, you already know what I need you all to do as you're coming into the building, whether you are a bush baby or actively in these streets in real time with me right now, or even if you are a part of the replay gang. I need you to thumbs up the video until it is absolutely stuck. Not only does this help support the YouTube's algorithm, more importantly, it triggers up YouTube's notification system. So this is your way of knocking on the digital front door of other Conscious Crew members who have no idea that we're allowed live and in color popping that good puss on this here Sunday. Okay, so make sure that you thumbs up as you are entering into the sanctuary. Also make sure that you have your notification bell set to all so that you never miss a day or hour of the Consciouztv platform. Also, make sure that you're make sure that you share this link out as well. Okay, to wherever it is you have digital community, girl, whether that is Facebook, MySpace, the dark side of Twitter, your personal OF. I don't give a damn where you lay the link to set them whores. No, that we're allowed live and in color. And with no further ado, let's go ahead and push on through. Okay.
I know a place where you can recharge your soul.
Baby, that's Consciouztv.
And in the midst of brokenness, he gon' see your asshole.
Baby, that's Consciouztv.
You gon' heal, you gon' laugh and catch a little shade.
Ooh, girl.
Y'all know he be slaying, y'all better stop playing. Come hear what he's saying.
Ladies and gentlemen.
All right, you guys. So I got a few church announcements before we get into the thick of it. First and foremost, we will be in Patreon today. It'll probably be in between the hours of 2 and 4, more than likely. But just make sure that you have your Patreon notifications set. Make sure that your email is turned on because Patreon sends the notifications to your personal email, whichever email you signed up with Patreon, on Patreon with, is where your notifications will go. If you also have the app downloaded on your phone, you can also turn on the notifications within the app. Just go into your settings, etc. And we're going to be getting into some things, girl. Also, I know that we also had covered this topic like last week, but it was in the middle of the night and I had some of my tea wrong. So I had to do a bit more research. And so I took that live stream down. Okay. And I'm also going to be joined here in this discussion with a professional who's also one of my faithful Conscious Crew members, Miss Cynthia, who is a registered nurse. Okay. She's going to be joining this discussion to talk about this tragedy and what's going on in healthcare in this country, etc. What this means for Black and brown folk as this era of devastation ultimately is about to ensue, girls. So we're going to be getting into some things, okay? Also, I want to shout out to my Conscious Crew member, Tanika, who cashed at me on yesterday to tell me to get my ass back to work. I think I'm one of the only content creators who get bribed with money. Like, literally, you guys will cash out me and PayPal me, okay, in order to coerce me, honey, and extort me into being loud, live, and in color. So shout out to Tanika and all of the Conscious Crew members, girl. I did take practically a week off and I feel wonderful. I went to New York to do some shopping. I got some beautiful garments. And I also traveled back to my hometown, South Carolina, and spent some time with my family. I had to see my niece, and I also spent some time with my father. And my father actually has Carisha-19. Okay, you guys may or may not know that there is a spike now happening in the country as it relates to Carisha-19. You guys know I have to use very coded language as it relates to speaking about this because Miss Google, honey, homie, don't play that. So Carisha-19 spikes are happening everywhere. They are definitely happening within South Carolina. There are 600 new cases of Carisha-19 that have popped up. And on top of that, there is a new variant. And my pops actually has the new variant. He's doing well right now. He's symptomatic, which is a property of this new variant. Apparently, you can come into contact with this variant and not experience any symptoms at all. It could be weeks before you experience any symptoms, etc. So they have him on an antibiotic, etc. And of course, he's wearing his mask and social distancing reasonably, etc. And what's really crazy about this is, you guys know that last week I also had expressed to you all that I had a astral projection session with some of my coven brothers. Okay, you guys know that I'm a Christian witch, and I get into all of the psychic things, the pineal gland, the third eye, remote viewing, astral projection, etc. girl. And we were attempting to peer into the future. Okay. And remember, I told you guys in my community wall, I kind of broke down some aspects of the experience. And I said then that there was another pandemic that is going to be on the way. This pandemic is also going to be coupled with a false paradigm shift narrative that I believe is more than likely going to involve a extraterrestrial narrative, a UFO narrative. Is going to be an insincere narrative. It's going to be a synthetic narrative that's going to be coupled with the second phase of this pandemic. Now, what I don't know is whether this new variant is officially a part of the second phase of the pandemic rollout, or if this is a experimental thing that they're doing, because they are just also throwing shit up against the wall and doing a trial testing on the public. So I don't know whether this is just them throwing some shit up against the wall, or whether this new variant is also going to be used in order to shift the country and to shift the global population into this more a communist, a socialist dynamic. But I do know that a second pandemic is on the way for sure. So we're going to keep our eyes open. Please make sure to just proceed with caution and just be aware, okay, in this coming age. Now, let me speak to some of y'all coming into the building. Hi, Rumors and Tea. Hey, Caitlin. Hi, Star Child. What's going on, Stella? Right. Another one just in time for election campaigning, just like it was last election. You know, the synchronicity of it all, the quote unquote coincidences of them all, baby. That's why we call it a pandemic. It's insane how just practically all of this stuff is happening in plain sight. I mean, they aren't even hiding it at this point. They are literally playing in our face. And there's also a documentary that we're going to watch in Patreon before the month is out. I'm going to bootleg this documentary so that I can get away without it infringing upon any copyright issues, etc. Girl, we have to watch this documentary. This documentary just took it to the next level as it relates to the pandemic. So I'll be keeping you guys posted on that as well. What's going on, Stella? Hey, Star Child. Hey, Sabby. Hey, Caitlin. What's going on, Bree? Hi. What's going on, Tanya? Hey, what's going on, Viper? Hey, Carolyn. What's going on? Hey, St. Marquise. Hey, Stella Rosa. What's going on, Adora? Hey, old nasty piece of Lisa. What's going on, IG? Hey, hi. What's going on, you guys? Okay, so let me bring up my guest, and then we're going to get into it because we got a few live streams to get into on today, girl, okay? Hi, Sin. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hey, Conscious crew and mods.
I am so happy to have you here. Clearly, your expertise is going to be absolutely necessary when talking about the subject today, and then all the other things that surround the situation as it relates to the medical care system. So I'm happy to have you here. Before we get started, is there any social media handlers that you want to divulge to the public to follow you at? If not, it's okay too.
I don't have a social media presence no more than when I come on with you. Maybe I should start, but I don't kind of know quite where to jump that off at. So not as of yet.
Well, that's a discussion that we definitely have, because I think you definitely need to be out here on these streets, especially considering your occupation, all of the information that you just have as a professional and as a Black woman, considering everything that Black women endure when it comes to the medical system of contemporary times. Now, I know we're here to talk about a very, very tragic scenario. I know you guys probably have heard by now of the couple, the Black couple who lost their newborn, okay, in Atlanta. And I'm going to pull up an article here so we can just get into some context, and then I'm going to get Sin to speak about her initial thoughts of the story, etc. Okay, so this is courtesy of CBSNews.com. Atlanta area doctor hospital sued after baby allegedly decapitated during birth. Okay, a Metro Atlanta doctor and a Clayton County hospital are facing a lawsuit after the delivery of a baby in July that went horribly wrong. On Wednesday, attorneys representing Jessica Ross and her boyfriend, Treveon Taylor, described what happened during the delivery of the couple's son at Southern Regional Medical Center on July the 9th. Quote, when the womb was open, the feet came out, the body came out, and there was no head, said Dr. Roderick Edmond, one of the couple's lawyers. Quote, Dr. St. Julian came in and she, in the process of trying to deliver the baby, pulled on the baby's head and neck so hard and manipulated them so hard that the bones of the baby's skull, face, and neck were broken. The couple is now suing Dr. Tracey St. Julian along with the hospital and several nurses involved in the delivery. They are being accused of gross negligence and covering up what happened. The healthcare providers at Southern Regional Hospital, after the horrific incident, told them these things and then tried to hide what actually happened, said Corey Lynch, another attorney representing the couple. And this here is that OBGYN MD, you guys, that is Dr. Tracey St. Julian. Edmond provided additional and even more disturbing details about what happened in the delivery room. Quote, when they wrapped this baby up tightly, they prompted the baby's head up on top of the blanket to make it appear that the baby's head was attached when it wasn't, he said. According to the attorney, St. Julian and the medical staff at the hospital failed to report the grisly incident to law enforcement. Instead, they allowed the couple to find out about the alleged decapitation from the funeral home. Quote, it wasn't until then that Dr. St. Julian told the family what actually happened. Up to that point, they had encouraged the family to, hey, just have a cremation done, Lynch said. Quote, their dreams and hopes turned into a nightmare. When contacted by No News Ontario, California-based Prime Healthcare Services, the system that owns Southern Regional Medical Center, released a statement citing patient privacy laws and HIPAA regulations preventing them from discussing the care of specific patients. The statement went on to say in part, quote, our heartfelt thoughts and prayers are with the family and all those impacted by this tragic event. Our prayers also remain with the dedicated team of physicians, nurses, and staff at Southern Regional Medical Center who cared for this patient. While our sympathies go out to the family, Southern Regional Medical Center denies the allegations in the complaint referencing the hospital. Since this matter is in litigation, we cannot provide additional statements. As far as Dr. St. Julian, she is not an employee of the hospital. The hospital has taken the appropriate steps in response to this unfortunate situation. During their press conference on Wednesday, the attorneys for the couple said they plan to press forward with their case and against the hospital and medical staff. Quote, we're going to put all of these people who were in the room under oath and find out what they had to say specifically about what happened that tragic evening, Edmond said. The attorney said that Clayton County Police and the medical examiner's office are investigating the case. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has confirmed that while it has not launched an investigation, it did perform a autopsy in this case, you guys. So, yes, what you just heard allegedly really took place. This young mother, Jessica Ross, 20 years of age, was performing a vaginal delivery, and everything popped out but the baby's head, apparently, which the face and skull were all broken, okay, upon what was left at the funeral home of the newborn, okay? Allegedly, according to the lawsuit, the doctor and several other staff members lied and concealed what truly took place. It took the funeral home to give the young couple a call and to let them know that their child had been decapitated, etc. And apparently, according to the suit, they were also encouraged to not have an autopsy done. As you guys heard from the article, the police were not initially involved or called, etc. And so this was a really big cover up. Now, you guys know in the last live stream, we visited the reviews of Dr. Tracey St. Julian. And prior to this particular incident, she seemed to have been a beloved MD. Her client seemed to have had a really great experience of her. We read reviews from other female patients who literally refused to give up Dr. Tracey for any other medical doctor. Like, people desire to stay with her. They've had a healing experience of her. They've had positive experiences of her as a doctor, etc. And these were all the reviews that were there prior to this incident. Now, of course, if you go look at Google now, and yep, now you will see her being dragged for everlasting life as it relates to the allegations against Dr. Julian. Okay. Before I go any further than that, well, actually, yeah. So before I go any further than that, Cynthia, as a registered nurse, and of course, just as a woman, as a mother, etc., what were your initial thoughts when you heard the story?
When I initially heard it, I'm gonna be honest with you, Conscious, I was mortified because I've never been a big women's services nurse, just because I have a VJJ and it doesn't thrill me. So to see stuff constantly at that end for most of your practice is not necessarily a thing for me. But I tried to wrap my mind around what the hell happened, because I'm like, wait a minute. The birthing issue is the head come out first. You mean she yanked the head out and pulled the body out? But as I, kind of, had some nurses and some sites on Facebook that we nurses, we sit, and it's a lot of it. We sit and discuss these issues and whatnot. And one of my previous colleagues was able to link from a doctor that was an OBGYN for 17 years. And apparently what has happened is that baby had what they call a very bad or severe shoulder dystocia, which shoulder dystocia means that the shoulders were essentially wider than the pelvic opening, so which makes that the baby is going to get stuck.
Right. Now, why do you think the doctor did not then transition into a C-section and insisted upon vaginal delivery? Do you think that it was out of laziness, that she just said, hey, we almost here? I mean, why go through all the rigmarole of a C-section? We might as well just continue to try to get this baby through the vaginal wall.
Right. Being that the head was delivered, but the problem was with the shoulders being stuck, they were trying to do maneuvers in order to unstick the shoulders, which then in and of itself can be quite brutal, even upwards of breaking. The nurse has to get her hands onto the abdomen, and I'm reading from this particular doctor. It has to get the nurse has to push his above the pubic bone to try to enlarge the back part of the shoulders. So then someone has to get their hands in the vagina in order to turn the baby's head in one direction in order to get that baby to slip that hand under that shoulder and displace that pubic bone. But apparently, you know, with the types of maneuvers that you do for this, it just did not work. Sometimes they have to break a baby's clavicle, or break the connection to the pelvic bones in the mother, which for her, that's dangerous because not only is it excruciatingly painful, but it sets her up for a severe bladder injury, especially if it gets nicked or what we call perforated, which is punctured. So apparently they did some things to try, and all the while the baby is getting further compromised. Because the maneuvers they saw, there was a doctor named Zavanelli, which coined the Zavanelli maneuver, which means that he learned how to be able to.
Can you hear me, Sin? Or you went out? Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
And before we go any further, are you saying that in this particular case, the head exited first and then the struggle was everything else?
The shoulders got stuck. So that means the baby was wider across the shoulders than it was the pelvic opening.
So let me ask you this question before we... So do you think... So what do you think about the description that was listed when it says that when the womb was open, the feet came out, the body came out, and there was no head? So is that after the fact, or?
I'm thinking the way that sounded to me was that by that time they had to get her into the suite to do the C-section or suite.
Okay.
And because the head is the way that it should have. I don't want to say play out, but the head may have been out of the vagina for her to have pulled it.
Jesus.
And then when she realized she couldn't do the maneuvering to get those shoulders past that from that unstuck position, and they had to, and she couldn't really even push the baby back in, although that's what they would have wanted. And then you go and do the C-section. Even if she did that, the risk that the baby's face and cranial skull and stuff could have got crushed might have been the reason why the baby had such those fractures and things made into the face that they were talking about. But it just seemed to me that somewhere in the remaining days or weeks up till it's time to deliver, the ultrasound should have been able to kind of, you can get measurements in utero with the ultrasound. That should have, you know, the measurements should have been taken. You know, they do check you. They put their fingers in places when we go and get pelvic exams and stuff, so they can gauge. And there's measurements called stations if you're negative and if you're positive. So there are things that they can.
I want to ask you a question, super quick. Nursing. Quan, first and foremost, said that several of my nieces and nephews were actually born at the hospital, and ironically enough, this same doctor, Dr. Julian, actually delivered his niece a few years ago. Wow. And as I said, a lot of the reviews prior to this incident of Dr. Julian are really positive, but in lieu of what you were saying about ways to determine this, Star Child said that a sonogram would have detected that before birth.
And this is true. This is what I'm saying. The ultrasound, the sonograms, like that machine can take measurements, and so, but you can't always, like Kawhi is saying, you can't know of the dystocia in the shoulders, and it's so infrequent that happens. But she might not have been a doctor for a very long time. So this could have very well been her first or maybe second case. It's not something that pops up every day. And she probably did too panic trying to, pull, and was going to risk, a dislocation and then resetting it. I mean, who's to know what her mindset was in that? Because the percentage of deliveries in which it happens, thank you, Kawhi, 2 to 3%. That's a very, very low proportion of out of total deliveries that you would see this. I mean, it's one of those really, really rare situations. But several things here. Definitely going back to what I was saying, feeling around, being able to measure, kind of gauging in that canal, what's why, you can't necessarily, feel a baby up in there yet, but in terms of before you deliver and you lose your water and your mucus plug and all of that and whatever. But it's sad because I think if just knowing she was a relatively younger doctor, she probably really could have panicked and then realized, oh shit, we got to do something, because she might have wasted so much time trying to get this baby dislodged. And the young lady is short in stature and she's a little bit more heavy set. So now we got that weight sitting on this baby that, and she probably wanted to push, and then the baby is stuck, and with the pushing and the, squeezing, adding compression to that body or even to the cord, and then started probably having changes in the baby's heart rate. So then this really became a serious medical emergency, obstetrical emergency. Whereas, by the time that they got in and was able to set up and get this C-section, which was probably a few minutes, considering that the baby was already so compromised, and it's a sad situation.
So let me ask you this question then, Sin. So what is the protocol when a injury this severe occurs? Like, was Dr. Julian, after the baby's head was detached, was she supposed to inform the patient at that time, who still had a bit more of a process to go through in terms of delivery, or is the protocol to go on, leave the patient temporarily unaware until delivery can be completed and then divulge this type of news?
Well, number one, she could have kept them abreast. Hey, we're running into an emergency. As soon as she tried the first time without yanking so hard on the damn baby's head, oh my God, hey, we got to get you to the cesarean suite quickly. We're running into a problem early. But before I even say that, early detection. I don't know. We don't know where the patient fell in terms of prenatal care up into those last few days and weeks prior to her going into labor. We don't know the young lady's medical history. Has she ever had a pelvic fracture or any kind of accident that would compromise the pelvic floor? Or was she had any deformities down there that we may not have known, or the doctor may not have were fully made aware of? That's why honesty is always the best policy when we go to these doctors. And I understand from especially Black men's standpoint, older Black men, let me quantify that. Like my father is ignorant as he wants to be about not wanting to tell doctors that he's had heart attacks. I'm like, look, dude, soon as we look at your EKG and your blood work, we can tell. But he doesn't think that we should know everything. Well, the more that we can tell and the more that we know, the further we can go. Absolutely. And it empowers not only us to be able to say, hey, we did our due diligence, but it empowers the doctors in knowing what they're going to be facing.
Right.
As far as the disclosure, yes, absolutely. We have it in emergency. Now, once they got in there and the baby was obviously clinically deceased and deformed and whatever, not telling her for days was not the right thing. But I have a feeling I may know what probably happened.
Okay. And before you get there, because I want you to hold on to that, Sin. And I want you got a feeling of what may have happened. Okay, so before we get there, so I want to go over some infant wrong death stats with you and just get your thoughts on these stats. I'm just gonna read them all through. 24,000 stillborn babies happen a year. Many stillborn causes are avoidable, but medical malpractice is one of the many sources that is preventable. According to the CDC, 7 out of every 1,000 babies occur birth injuries. The most common birth injuries are brain damage, which is due to a lack of oxygen. Okay, I'm gonna let you speak because I gotta take this phone call. It's very important, but you speak on that. Well, you just speak on that, and I'll be right back.
Okay. Back to what I was saying. I think I may have known what may have happened, ladies and gentlemen. It could have been that as soon as, everybody in the higher ups in the C-suite became aware, then all of a sudden risk management wants to put the, verbal clink down on everybody. Don't say nothing. Don't talk about it. Da 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 da. And I know some people were concerned, well, why didn't she have an autopsy? And why they were discouraging it. According to the same information of this particular OBGYN, they only tend to do it if the mother and the baby dies, because then it's something that happens. Since they pretty much know the shoulder dystocia led to all of these untoward events, they don't always recommend it. But actually, I've never been a big proponent of risk management, because I've seen them where they protect the worst of the doctors, and I have a whole big story about that one here in Atlanta that I'm still waiting to see if a case coming out of, because I did the right thing and it wasn't anything wrong that I did. I actually helped save this woman's life, but the doctor was so vehemently wrong that his colleagues pretty much ran him out of Dodge. But they usually did want to silence everybody and do what they call their internal investigations, root cause analysis, what processes led to this, what could have been done better, or what was missed, or those kinds of things. So the first thing they want to do is put the silence down on everybody. And then too, she very well, not to discourage this young lady, but you got to know these days, with the stuff that can very well happen. I try to empower the public. Please go to the hospitals that specialize in the things that you got going on. Yes, you can have a baby at Piedmont, at Southern Regional, at Emory, but the baby birthing factory in the Atlanta area is always Northside Atlanta. I'm not a proponent in promoting one hospital to another. I'm just telling what the truth is, because your outcomes are better. They may have seen this over there more than any other hospital in this area. So they would know and have the specialized doctors and the specialized NICUs and those kinds of places where they can handle these types of birth emergencies. You would not go to an urgent care and you're having a massive heart attack. Even though we've seen it, people do it. When it comes to your health, you only get one chance to do it right. Because once that body ceases to breathe and there's no brain activity, there's no amount of drugs we can push in the critical care, the advanced cardiac life support algorithm that we can push to bring you back. So the public, I think in 2023, in the 21st century, we know how to research everything, but we do the very least amount of research, credible research, when it comes to healthcare. First and foremost, in this area in Atlanta, we have 3 different children's hospitals. I don't ever see the purpose of taking a child to an adult hospital when we have 3 main children's hospitals that see the children up to 18, and in certain cases, like I know with sickle cell, sometimes up to age 21. Unless you just think that it's quicker to get them seen there. No, because if we miss something in an adult hospital because we don't have those specialized instruments for pediatrics and babies and newborns, you very well something could be missed. And then that's a delay in care. And if it's serious enough and it goes on too long, it could jeopardize the health of that child. Go where you can. I understand not having a car. Hell, mine is down for the count, probably never to start up again. But it's still advocate to get somebody, have a good friend, have a family member, church member, somebody that you can entrust that, hey, if something happens, this is the hospital I want to go to. Unless you're having a dire emergency, do not try to get in the car and drive, especially men in chest pain and women in chest pain. Don't do that. I've seen bad things happen on my way to work. I beat a patient there who was trying to get there having a heart attack and had an accident. By the time I showed up to work, his ambulance was behind me. And I already knew what had happened because it had caused a traffic jam. Call 911. Advocate for yourself. Now, considering that I saw the young man and the young woman in this particular case that we're talking about on the news, I'm wondering who was there to advocate for them. You know, I'm not saying that they, you know, were functionally, you know, had some understanding issues or literacy issues or whatever, but you got to take people to the hospital. That don't mean bringing Pookie and Baby and them that did not graduate from high school and have a 6th grade understanding. No, that's not who you need in your corner. You need somebody that can advocate, that has a cursory understanding of, you know, I'm not saying having textbook knowledge like I have as a medical professional, but when a doctor talks to you, and we try, and I have had to prompt my younger doctors and nurses and mid-levels to, hey, you know, make sure we're not using too big of words so everybody can understand what's going on in the room, but to make sure that they understand. And if it's a special way or that you talk or language or verbiage or terms that you use, that the person that is there to advocate for you, that can understand and advocate on your behalf, can at least make it simple enough for you to understand it in your language in the terms that you use. We try to speak on a 6th grade level. Doesn't always work because dystocia is not a word nobody has known until this came out. Of course, we knew it. But at this point, I just want the public and you all to understand, because these conversations, while we're sitting here having conversations about who shot John, who did this, who did that, and all this stuff in social media and pop culture, these are the conversations Black people need to have, because we're on the brink of some very serious issues going on. Carisha 19 is kicking up. And there's a lot about this version of it that they're not telling you. That number one, it's not going to be readily detectable with the kits that we have now. So you could be walking around infectaging everybody and won't even know it, and still could be asymptomatic. But then too, where you may not know you had it, it's going to hit harder than the other versions. So don't be prideful. Talk about what just because you had the vaccine. The vaccine lessens the chances of it being terminal for you, but that's not a guarantee either, because with the vaccines they got out now, ain't doing nothing on this one right now. So, you know, because we know this, put your mask back on, get your hand sanitizers back in the car. You know, if you're sick, stay home. You know, I understand that, you know, the Renaissance tour is going and you just spend oodles of money to go see Bouncy and them and all of that, but you only get one life to live. Bouncy's still gonna be bouncing when you singing Near My God to Thee in the family, you know. So these kinds of things I need for you all to understand. When you're having a stroke, don't say, oh, granddaddy been acting weird for 3 days, and then get mad at us when you come to the ER and it's nothing we can do. You're outside of a window. You only get 4 hours. So as soon as you see that something is funky and he start talking gibberish, don't be afraid to dial 911. Yes, ambulances cost money, but so does everything else we spend money on. You got to be selective. Do you want J's or do you want granddaddy to be here another 30 days? Stuff like that. Go to the EMS people know where the stroke centers are and the cardiac certified centers are. Now, the rule of thumb is to take you to the nearest place to get help, because every place should be able to stabilize you. Now, do every place do it right? Not all the time. And there are some conditions I've received patients from other hospitals, and in my mind, I'm like, what the hell did they just do? Because none of it, it was just bad all the way around. But know what these facilities are in your insurance network, in your community, so you know where to go to get the best care, because behind that is the evidence through research that we're most current in the most current literature that's out there. If they made a change to the order of how we do first aid in terms of heart savers for CPR, some people are still doing ABC. They don't understand. A few years back, it changed from CAB. You do compressions. We're not so much as concerned with the breathing, although we want some breaths, but there's still a measure of oxygen still left in the blood, that as long as you pump in at least 80 beats to 100 beats a minute, which actually, if you sing a song like Staying Alive and you compress the chest at that rate, people have a better outcome. Please, in this day and age, we got young men, several young men. I know one in Maryville, Indiana, just dropped in while practicing football out and died. His funeral was just, I think, sometime last week. Bystander CPR. If you all don't know nothing else, it'll teach you how to prevent choking hazards in the home with small children, with younger people that are healthy that ended up with Koresha-19 are now having undiagnosed heart issues, and then they're under extreme heat and exhaustion from practices for sports, and they're going down like flies. These pediatric doctors are not going and running EKGs and stuff and checking their hearts no more than what they have to get them ready for school, for their school physicals. This kind of specialized stuff is what we need to be talking about, because as more nurses and doctors are leaving this business because of the effery and ligament that's happening at the highest levels of healthcare in some of these facilities, the life you save will be your own. It's not going to be a maybe, but it will be your own. I'm not expecting people to know everything, but a cursory understanding of, if you're pregnant, the best hospital to have a baby in your area. These things can now be researched online. There's a search thing called HCAPS. I think it's HCAPS. HCAPS. It scores the hospitals in terms of the types of care that they give and what the ratings are. If they're good, bad, ugly, the best, if it's a magnet hospital, if it's from the uttermost to the guttermost. All of this stuff is online now. We are a digital community globally. We should be able to find anything we want to find out. Hell, I can be found in the state board registry. The nurses can be found. I don't advocate people going to look, because they put a little bit too much of our information out there, like your address and stuff. And no, don't be pulling up on me with the effery and the ligament, because surprise, surprise, you'll find yourself needing the very hands to save your life. But stuff like that, you can find out what the doctor's ratings are. All of this stuff can be found. We paying attention to too much of the wrong stuff. I'm not saying not to live, not to enjoy. Hell, don't nobody love streaming and trash TV and all of that stuff no more than I do, because it's a great stress reliever when the world gets too heavy. But I still know what is needed to advocate for me and mine. If my family called right now and something goes down and I have to jump on the plane, Cynthia's gonna be there. I have a cousin waiting to have surgery, keep having problems with her diabetes, and she works in dietary. She know better. But somewhere along the line, trying to work and take care of herself and her kids, her foot came up broke because of neuropathy. So now, not only they're fixing the infection, guess what? Now she needs surgery. And when you're diabetic and you start working on feet because of circulation problems, they don't give a hell about chopping off toes. They don't care how young you are. And she's considerably younger than I am. So these are things I want people to start to think about, because this is happening. We are one of the more civilized nations in the world, but we have the worst outcomes when it comes to mortality in OB rates for mother and for babies. Judge Hatchett, her son and his wife, what they went through at the loss of her, because they waited too long to see about her in a delivery complication, and she subsequently died. They're still illuminating that you have men, if you all want to be in these delivery suites, go and find out where you can become your wife's own doula. That's somebody that knows the systems of what it does to support the mother physically while she's laboring and in the first few weeks of postpartum. That's education that you can turn into a business for yourself. I mean, there are men now, there's a big push for men that are learning to be doulas because they've had this to happen. They've lost the wife or the child, or if not both. So I encourage you guys to please, please, please start taking this stuff seriously. I know, eating right and exercising and veganism and everything, that vegetarian and all that stuff is good, but it does not mean nothing if you're not getting your well woman and your well man physicals once a year. If you're over the age of 40, hey, men, I know you don't like prostate exams, but you're gonna need to get it. Hey, nobody over 40 like colonoscopies, but the insurance pays for those. That is part of your well woman and well man health care. Don't let them tell you, oh, you don't need one till you 50 and 60. That's bunk. Because too many young people, we've learned nothing with Chadwick Boseman, that ended up dying from colon cancer, which is so preventable. All you got to do is just go and get the procedure done. The prep is worse than the procedure. You'll get like 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes of some real good sleep. And I should know because I've been getting them for since I was the age of 35, with my mother being a colon cancer survivor. Women, once we hit 40, weight loss is a big problem. I know. I had the gastric bypass, lost my husband, gained some of the weight back. Never could take it off, and I don't eat enough to support it. Come to find out, had issues with my thyroid nodules. The last biopsy I had was in 21, right before Labor Day. And when I decided to get the surgery, summer of last year, was full-fledged cancer. So I'm a thyroid survivor. So do not take no for an answer, women. When you go get your well womans, you're having a hard time losing weight, no matter how much exercise and dieting that you're doing. Hey, tell them they need to be checking your hormone levels, because that's usually what makes it so hard for us, especially after the age of 40. These are things that we need to be discussing in the Black community now and in the brown community. Hey, the same rules apply across the board. There's nothing wrong with going to clinics and county hospitals, because there are some in this country that really service our community and have done well, and have, if there's no other alternatives and you don't have health insurance, at least you can go there and get cursory care. At least somebody can see you and know that if something is diagnosed, if you go regularly like you should, we will have a baseline of where you stand if something changes. But it's always when we find out it's too late, and then everybody wants to be mad at healthcare providers because there's nothing we can do. We used to see the commercials about getting the colonoscopies and stuff. Now they're just not running stuff anymore. So we got to have these conversations, just so, the life you save will be your own. Because even though we got a plethora of nursing schools now, these younger nurses, they're not as invested as I was in 26 years at the bedside to be there that long. So they're trying to go and become bosses and C-suites and advanced degrees and get away from the bedside. We don't have people to take care of folks. That's why it's looking real sketch for this fall. You know, you got flu, pneumonia, RSV, which it was never a thing for adults to have it until the recent years. That's a childhood respiratory illness. And then Carisha 19, come on now. You know, and if we, especially if the weather stays going like it's going and it doesn't cool off across the country soon, those numbers are going to start rising and rising and rising and rising. So we got to know how to take care of each other. You know, parents, get your kids to the primary pediatric doctors. Go to the pediatric hospitals. Don't be afraid to give them Tylenol and Motrin. Don't bring them to the hospital all they had a fever for 2 days and they severely dehydrated. Well, did you? Because my first question is always, did you get some Tylenol or some Motrin? Well, no, we didn't have none. And that's kind of hard when you come in with McDonald's. And I'm looking at, and I'm not judgmental, but we don't be thinking about, like, what in the hell is these folks doing? They got whole McDonald's and he's feeding this baby who's not eating, but they couldn't go to Walgreens or Walmart and get a couple dollars of Tylenol, children, infant Tylenol, stuff like that. Because I'm going to tell you something, the ugly side of healthcare is some of the things I've heard, not only Black and brown people say, but doctors in mid-levels of other races, colors, creeds, and religions call us dumb niggas because we don't even take the responsibility for our own health in our own hands. I mean, I've had to correct. I'm like, yo, wait a minute, hold up. But I have heard some egregious shit. So I'm just letting you know, hospitals are going to protect themselves, and they, especially as long as there are risk management departments that tell them shut up, don't say nothing until we can put a spin on it. Then you got HR that would threaten your job because they're not for you as an employee, they're for the hospital. You know, trust me, we are living in some paradigms I've never experienced in healthcare before. And I don't think anybody has seen that's, you know, under the age of 100.
Okay, I'm back. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's all right. I was just giving the
I know you was on here giving it to the girls, honey.
I was just giving them some food for thought.
I'm so upset, Sam, because I missed some of it, but I don't want to take you all the way back through everything.
I know, just, you know, do like I do you, replay game.
Yes, I would hit the replay on my own stash. I'm going to smoke my own stuff today, baby. But I do want to ask you, and thank you for holding it down. I do want to ask you what you thought about why you think the communication era happened. I do.
Well, that's exactly what I was just talking about. Okay. Risk management, put a silence on them. I mean, and there's a way to be able to share that we've done everything that we could. You know, risk management is all about waiting to see with, you know, investigation who really was at fault and try to put a spin on it. Victim blame if they think she didn't go to her OB appointments or, you know, didn't get any prenatal care stuff that we, you know, as the public may not be privy to. So, you know, you got to stay up on this kind of thing. And the bad part about it is, you know, even with a lawsuit, you know, back in Bush, you know, the son's era, they changed the laws of how much you can get now. The cap is $250,000.
Jesus, for a loss of life.
It's the punitive damages where you can get upwards of millions, but then they're gonna litigate the hell out of that.
So speaking of the lawsuits, I know where we ended off at was me talking about some of these stats. I want to read some of these stats to you.
Yes, that's what we left out.
Okay. So 24,000 stillborn babies come into the world each year. Many stillborn causes are unavoidable, but medical malpractice is one of the many sources that is preventable. According to the CDC, 7 out of every 1,000 babies occur birth injuries. The most common birth injuries are brain damage due to a lack of oxygen. Birth trauma occurs largely in rural areas Women between the ages of 25 and 34 are at the largest risk for birth injuries caused by assistive delivery tools like forceps or vacuum extraction complications. Mothers ages between 15 to 17 years of age at highest risk for birth injuries when no assistive delivery tools are used during vaginal delivery. Birth trauma can lead to lifelong disabilities and even death for the infant and or the mother. 157,000 birth injuries to mothers or babies occur because of malpractice a year. Medical errors are a leading cause of accidental deaths in the US. They account for 251,000 to 440,000 deaths a year. Recent study geared to understanding birth injuries found that liability claims involving pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum care involve severe injury. That same study analyzed 472 claims from 2013 to 2017 and discovered that 80% of cases were of high clinical severity. Infant and mother died in 24% of the cases analyzed. 41% of claims were of brain damage, 37% were of shoulder injuries, and 34 deaths and that 34% of those claims were deaths or stillborns. Contributors to injury and deaths: inexperienced midwives, because of, so I want to go through this list and get your take on this too. Inexperienced midwives, because of clinical experience and licensing requirements vary from state to state. This can cause some issues. What are your thoughts on midwives and how they should be vetted from your perspective?
Well, midwives are, and I've used the term here that I should have clarified, mid-levels. That's anybody that's a nurse practitioner, midwives, things of that issue. Let's be honest, a lot of the little boys and girls going to nursing school now are not vetted into being at the bedside no longer than a year or two. Or 3 if before they go back for advanced degrees or leave that and go do travel nursing, which I've been a large part of my career. And a lot of them do not assess. And that's just not exclusively to mid-levels. That's also to your bedside nurses. You know, if you encounter your nurse from the ER to you walking out the door and you have not seen her pull out a stethoscope on you, be very concerned, because assessment drives care. If I don't know what your lungs sound like, how am I to detect if there's a burgeoning problem there if I don't listen? Same thing. They go ahead. The art of assessment is lost on the newer generations of nurses, and some of the old ones that just gotten plain lazy and abiding their time to retirement. Those that are invested in being in this business will assess. I have always assessed. I buy $400 and $500 and $600 stethoscopes, which have gotten tens of years of usage. I've had doctors like, "Oh, I thought you was a nurse. I didn't know you was a mid-level." No, I'm a nurse. I'm still listening to heart sounds and breath sounds in the gut, because you got doctors now that don't even assess, and I couldn't believe the injuries I find behind them, and I have to go to the doctor's station and be like, "Hey, doc, you might want to throw in a chest X-ray because such and such ain't got no sounds in his chest at the bottom." He'd be like, "Well, but they came in with a stomach." I said, "You might want to do that." And come to find out, flail chest. The patient got like 4 or 5 cracked ribs. It's usually elderly people because their bones are so soft and brittle. You know, stuff like that. I've found undiagnosed UTIs on elderly people because nurses don't want to undress the patients in the ER. When you look at skin, it tells you a whole lot about what's going on with a person.
Absolutely.
When you and I try to tell people, when you go into hospitals, I know a lot of nurses want to try to entrap the other nurses by, well, I'm going to sit back and not tell them I'm a nurse. You don't have to direct their care, but at least let them know that there's some professional eyes watching you. My mother had surgery this year. Before I could get to her, they had given her so much Dilaudid at 77. I was like, what the hell are y'all doing? And I was able, because the charting system was linked to my phone and my system, I was able to see exactly what they were doing. When I called my cousin who acts in my steed until I can get to her because she lives in another state. I said, take her off the Dilaudid, give her no more than 4 to 6 of morphine, and I'll be there tomorrow. When I got there, she was just as high as a kite. But within 24 hours, she was out of bed, sitting in the chair. I recovered her. He came back and saw her the next day. He said, oh my God, what did you do? I said, I came to recover my mother. I know what I'm doing. The nurses didn't have to bathe her. They didn't have to coerce her to get out of bed and walk. Nah, come on, sis. Because my mother don't even fool up with me, and I'm a child. And I'm like, nah, come on, sis. We getting out that bed. You get in that tub. No, she don't. She'll tell you in a minute. She don't fool up with me. No, she don't. She really.
And I'm always be the ones that they don't fool up with, who actually are there for them.
And
in
I
the
have recovered her body more than once. And I told him to put an NG tube in her because she's going to get nauseous. Yo, nurse is going to fool around and feed her before her bowel sounds wake up. Well, what do you think I saw when I walked in the room? I said, And he was scared to come talk to me that evening. He waited till he got through with all his notes, with all his surgeries, and came to see me on his way out the door. Wow. So look, I was sitting there in the chair waiting for him. I didn't get upset when I said, hey, Doc, how you doing? He was like, are you the daughter from Atlanta? I said, yeah, I'm Cynthia. I said, he was like, well, what had happened? I said, yeah, I saw that NG tube. I said, let me get you to understand something. This is not her first time having that particular surgery. And she's had an NG tube and PACU before because that was the standard. Now they just if they don't think you're going to be nauseated, they're not going to give it to you. Well, she was nauseated, vomiting everywhere, then the pain medicines. So I managed her NG tube, and within a day and a half after I got there, we were getting ready to pull that sucker. Because I was able to be like, you're not feeding her no more. She got the tube in. This is what we going to do. Yada, yada, yada. I watched
your mother is blessed to have a daughter who is also a medical professional, because you were able to adequately advocate for her and on her behalf.
And I told him, I said, from now on, if I tell you to do something, go ahead and do it. I know I've recovered that body more than once.
Okay, so that's a good stuff. So inexperienced midwives,
the assessment,
please vet them.
Assessment.
Yeah, because of the licensing and experience, a requirement.
It's a level
vary from state to state.
Yes, that too. We now have a thing called compact licensure, the ENLC, which means that my Georgia license can now work in the state of Mississippi without me having to get a separate license, but it's by reciprocity, which I still have to follow the Nursing Practice Act of that state, but my state's license can suffice because they're under the compact. Right. And a lot more states are being added. Some states will probably never be compact because they want the money. Absolutely. California is one of them. New York is another one, in which I'm licensed in those states too. Yeah. I can practice in about maybe 20 something, maybe 30 some states I can practice in.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
So
but a lot of it, but back to your question though, a lot of what we see is that under 3 to 5 years, you don't see everything in your certain field of specialty. You got to stay at that bedside. Just because textbook does not always play out the same in the clinical field. And a lot of them just want to go and be nurses so they can get advanced degrees. Hell, I want to make $100,000 because my ass is unemployed right now. Part and partial because I have to try to get hired with a bunch of new grads that they're paying $25, $35 for when I start out at 60. And I've had the doctors tell me, honey, your resume is amazing, but they ain't gonna pay you, so we can't hire you.
Wow. Okay, because I want us to get to that as well. So Bree is saying to make sure they are certified midwives and have privileges in a hospital. Also ask them how many deliveries they've done, because these requirements and experiences, etc., vary. You guys have to be thorough in vetting your own midwives, and please get the Carfax on these individuals. You can't make an assumption.
Right, just was the hospitals are doing some piss poor vetting lately. They've had a black woman who then got caught more than once practicing nursing with somebody else's license.
Absolutely.
And then we had the whole mess of the nurses that, you know, went to these diploma mill places and got enough education to pass a test, which was the nursing boards, and then was subsequently got licensed. And then a lot of they are still finding these nurses every month. So it's problematic. And what opened the door to a lot of that was Carisha 19, because they was trying to, hey, they will put a mirror up under your nose, you're breathing, okay, we need you.
Yeah.
And, you know, because and then some of the new literature coming out now, they're going to decrease some of the education just to get more nurses in the clinical sector. I came across that article last week, and I was like, Lord, I got to hurry up and become an actress or something, because I got acting classes at 3:30. Because that if we already have the cursory knowledge that we need as far as education, and we're still piss poor in our clinical habits, and you take away some cursory, it's only going to get worse. It's going to be a public health crisis. They fixing it by giving more money for nursing schools, but now you're talking about, well, we're going to make it where they can cut the time and go a lot less time. No, we need that time and more, because all you get you get the practical hands-on in school, but you get more didactic in anything, which is classroom, textbook, theory. Not all theory and textbook translates to what you see once you standing over that body at the bedside and on your own. That's why we need to do more teaching and fundamentals with assessment, because you can find so much more and prevent so much more. We got to get back to when I came out of school in 1997, I could not go back to graduate school in under 5 years. Now you can, I've had a young lady that I remember we trained years ago, young white girl, came out of school and she got her bachelor's and then not come out and get a job, went straight through and got her master's, then came out to be a nurse for the first time, and she was already licensed as an NP. And I was like, if that was not the most dangerous shit that could have ever happened, but at least she was more prudent then to know that I have to go and be a bedside nurse. So she knew she couldn't work as an NP until she had a couple of years of that under her belt. But now we see nurse people on these social media sites, especially the ones for nurses in Facebook and the different Facebook sites. Oh, how can I be a nurse without going to clinical? The hell? I mean, I'm like, if these dangerous practices are putting the public at risk because they won't fix the intrinsic problems, which are pay, better benefits, and staffing ratios.
That part. And we're going to get into that because there's a whole article that I want us to talk about.
Yes.
So it's a few more contributors to injury and death that I want to talk about. And you touched on this a few moments ago. Miscommunication between mothers and their healthcare providers, lack of understanding regarding expectations before, during, and after birth. Professionals need to address expectations ahead of time to ensure that everyone is on the same page. You would agree with that, obviously.
Oh, yes. I mean, a large part of it is, too, before we had a lot of the systems in place, which are the charting systems, trying to reach doctors in the middle of the night when there are hospitals that don't have hospitalists. I had a patient, had a full-on STEMI, who was a whole hour. I did what I needed to do to get the patient to the cath lab in 20 minutes. I still had to wait for an hour and a half to get a cardiologist in order for them to call in the cath lab team. Because Don't nobody want to answer the phone. Then they catch your attitude with you when you call. And this was a mid-level. This was an EMP. Well, they kept calling me for Tylenol. Well, ho, you wanted to be the EMP? Now give these folks these Tylenol orders and answer this phone because I got a stimmy going on. She didn't call me back until her attendant cussed her ass out. Then she wanted to be syrupy sweet with me. I said, this patient could have been had that cab.
So let me ask you this question then.
On you.
So let me ask you that. So let me ask you this question. With that being said, in 2018, I had my appendix removed. My appendix had burst, and I went from my grandfather's home to the ER, where I was then put in for an emergency surgery. Obviously, Sin, is it normal that a patient in need of emergency surgery, particularly around the appendix, which had exploded, like it had popped, all of that fluid, etc., was just running all through me? Do you know, Stan, that I sat in a cold, dark hospital room for 11 hours before a doctor was able to come and perform that surgery?
And see, that's the problem. No, because as soon as we know that you ruptured, long as you don't have major fever or anything that's contraindicated, that you would stop breathing on that table, you should have been headed straight to that OR suite. But the problem is finding doctors. It used to be when doctors were on call, they had to stay at the hospital. Now they get to go home. They be on the golf course and all of this stuff. And if it's after hours, God, Jesus.
Oh, so let me tell you about that. So I went into the ER around 7 that morning. I think it was actually longer than 11 hours. 7. They did not roll and start prepping me for surgery until 11:30 that night. And then the first doctor that was supposed to come in, something happened where he couldn't come in. So then they had to pull another doctor from another hospital who was actually sleeping in his bed to come in and get in. So I didn't get into surgery until 1 a.m.
Now, answer me this question. Were you septic after that?
What does that mean?
Septic, sepsis, blood poisoning where you need.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Good. Good. Probably could have happened was that doctor was stuck at another hospital in another emergency.
Yeah, I think that's actually what happened. He was
that's usually
tied up in another surgery.
That's what when they're tied up with another surgeries and especially in these specialties that don't have as many surgeons, even though a general surgeon is what you needed. Unless they thought.
So that's crazy that it took them damn near 13 hours to find me.
How big was this hospital?
This was one of the main central hospitals of the city.
Now, was it after hours and weekend?
Oh God, what? I don't remember what day of the week it was.
Because see,
no. It was a Monday morning, so surgery didn't happen until Tuesday morning.
Hell, they all should have been at work and freshly rested. So they didn't have enough general surgeons or something.
And how could that be possible in a metropolitan, very...
Same with nurses. People want to go for the uber complex stuff. If they want to do surgery, they want to say that they are cardiovascular or cardiothoracic surgeons. General surgery is a subset of a lot of different surgeries, but they're still very much important, just like your special, neurosurgeons and cardiothoracic surgeons or whatever. But it still doesn't explain why they didn't have enough on staff to see you as soon as you walked in, because 7 a.m. on a Monday morning means that the weekend is over. All hangovers should be resolved. All partying should be resolved. They should have been freshly rested. Everybody should be all hands on deck. And for the fact that you waited that long was concerning to me. and actually they didn't even try to send you to another hospital, but then had to wake up another doctor who had probably had worked all day and did office and surgeries. That's just weird to me.
Look, I thought it was, but I mean, it was the most horrific, agonizing physical pain I've ever been in, and to sustain it for that long was absolutely crazy. Now, my last question before we move on is, if I would have died in the process of awaiting a doctor, would the hospital would have been at fault, or like if the circumstances kind of create that type of outcome,
like, they would have been liable because there was a delay in care.
Delay in care. Wow.
Because at some point, the doctor that they called eventually woke him up. They couldn't have got him 12 hours earlier. See, this is what I'm saying. I mean, you ruptured. They know, even though they were probably trying to keep you as stable and pain-free as possible, which probably wasn't what you wanted to hear. And you probably felt like complete and utter shit. But there are backup processes, even if the department, the head of surgery has to come in and do it themselves. They were just being on the low end of lazy, because you got to escalate stuff when it's an emergency. Yeah. And because, you know, appendix ruptures are pretty common, it used to be where it was, we got to get you in now. Oh, well, you know, he's in surgery with another one right now. He'll be out in an hour, and then we'll get you ready. And then next thing you know, they got a blood trauma come in from like some kind of gunshot wound or something that takes precedence, and it moves the needle for you back. But this is why, you know, I understand that people want to be in healthcare. It used to be a push for, you know, getting more Black doctors and brown doctors. We need to be back on that push again, because the education processes for them are so long that we don't have as many young people going like we used to. Yeah. But this is the thing. That's why we have in the Kauai, she said they did it because they realized that you weren't going to escalate it. We shouldn't have to go in there. So what's crazy about asses? Yeah. Well, number one, they should have called the rapid response team, because that's the last job outside of the ER that I had, which means my word was law at night next to the nursing supervisor. I was second in command and off hours and weekends when I worked, which means if the patient need to go to ICU, or the doctor said that this, that, and the other, I've been the nursing supervisor. I've had to call in surgery teams, be like, look, hey, you know, Dr. such and such told me to call you. He on his way. We got a such and such case going on. He wants y'all here in such and such amount of time.
There are 5 other hospitals in the city that this surgery took place in. So there were definitely more than enough other facilities to send me.
Right. And then some places now, the doctors may not have had privileges at. I mean, it's a myriad of things, but the problem was if that ER doctor clearly was like, well, they can hold off, or thought that the other doctor would come in since they were tied up momentarily. But whenever a certain amount of time go by and you're not getting what you need, you got to start escalating. You got to be talking to the nursing supervisor or to doctors.
Okay, so I want to speak into that point as well. So I only recall being checked on twice in a 12-hour period. For one, I remember laying there at one point, actually asking myself, had they actually forgotten that I was actually here? And I was alone, and I was in so much pain that I couldn't even use my cell phone. Like, that's literally how devastating.
And that's dangerous. I mean, I would have recommended that somebody would have stayed with you because when you're in that level of pain and you're hurting and you could start to hallucinate, you could just they may have gotten so bogged down with other patients coming in and other situations, they may have forgotten or forgot that they need to be hearing back from another doctor in regards to your care. Anything is the reason. Any number of those factors independently or all together was probably the reason why your case was pushed back so far. because that's not what should have happened. That's not the norm. And if it's becoming the norm, that's another public health safety issue that, you know, needs to be looked at, because those processes were faulty, that they couldn't get another general surgeon to come in, because the surgery, you know, you could have risked so much other issues, especially because it ruptured, not because you were just aching and they realized that you had appendicitis, but the damn thing ruptured at this point.
Yeah. All of that toxic fluid was just sitting in my
was
body.
accumulating in the peritoneal space, right in your abdomen, just collected. That's why I asked you, did you have like major, you know, sepsis or anything outside of that? You know, granted, you're going to get the antibiotics, but septic meaning you needed weeks of antibiotics and that.
No, I didn't have any type of septic poison at all. Like it was clear that God was with me from the beginning.
But that's why I said, do not in this day and age, until you hear from healthcare workers saying things are getting markedly better, do not allow yourself to, if at all possible, allow yourself to be left alone in a hospital. Carisha 19 left a lot of people alone, even though we would try to do our best to be at the bedside, but we too had to limit ourselves in the rooms to keep from getting sick, to take care of you all. And then a lot of nurses use their personal phones and to let family members talk to those that were dying, to FaceTime them, to Google time them, and all of that whatnot, to try to make the processes easier, which was hard on everybody.
Yeah.
But I always say something, do not allow for yourself to go. Make sure somebody can come up there and sit with you. If you got to pay them, baby, I'll take you out to lunch when I get better, or I'll pay a bill for you, or I'll buy you some J's or something. Because when you don't have an advocate, you will slip through the
absolutely. And I should have had an advocate, but the way that everything unfolded was so in the moment. I didn't even have because I was actually, I would tell you how crazy this was. I was taking care of my grandfather who suffered from dementia. I was like his caretaker on the weekends.
I remember you said
that. So I was getting ready to finish up. I was getting up to cook a breakfast. I was washing his clothes and just getting my Monday morning started. And then as soon as I'm stepping out from the laundry room back into the kitchen, which is adjacent to the laundry room, I heard the pop and then I collapsed. And then from there, all I could focus on was getting to my cell phone, which was like toward the back of the house. So I had to military belly crawl from the laundry room, up steps, through the kitchen, down the hall. I had to call 911. Then because it was only me, it was me and my grandfather there, but there was another individual there. But I was on my own. It was equivalent to me that person not being there. So I then had to, because my grandfather has dementia and sometimes he tries to leave out of the house, we had to put a lock on the front door from the inside as well, so that he couldn't unlock the door and just leave out at the time of the night, etc. So then I had to, once I realized the ambulance was on the way, I had to crawl from the back room to the front room just to unlock the damn door with the key. And then the only thing I had the energy to do was to lay on the living room floor. Like when the ambulance pulled up, they found me literally spread out in the living room floor. Like I didn't even have the gall to call my grandmother, to call my pops, to call my brother. No, nothing. Like I was just so overwhelmed and retching. It's a transformative type of pain. Like it's a type of agony that introduces like psychotic thoughts into your mind, because that's just how brutal it was. I have never felt pain like that. And I didn't even know that type of pain could actually be manifested and felt. I mean, I was almost like out of my mind. That's how blinding the pain was. So I didn't even have the capacity to call anybody. Like I literally left my grandfather there. That's how disabled I was. Like I had to leave the house in the ambulance, and then from there I was in that back room until like 1 the next morning, etc. And I was marinating in that agony the entire time. And I remember thinking, Like, yes, like, am I going to die in this room? Because this pendant is not rupturing, it has ruptured.
It had ruptured at that point.
Yeah, it ruptured. So this shit is just sitting in. It was a hot mess. But glory be to God. If I could have, like, if I had the capacity to call someone in, I definitely would have, but I couldn't even do that. So on these last 2 points, and then I want to touch on something with you too.
Right.
Poor management of labor and delivery as it relates to the infant deaths. Physicians not knowing when to perform C-sections instead of vaginal birth, and lacking prevention skills that lead to common birth injuries. And then poor monitoring of the fetal heart patterns, not properly monitoring a fetus's heart beat before, during, and after delivery also lead to infant injuries and deaths.
Right. That's why it's so important to that nurses that want to work in OB and delivery and in those places know fetal heart tones. They have to be able to read the strip that is coming off, because it'll tell you in early and late decelerations of that heart rate that baby is in trouble. And you know that first off before the mother even could be totally aware, because she's feeling so many different things and emotions are, on edge or whatever. That strip, that reading of that strip will let you know that baby is in trouble. But you should definitely be watching it. And what was the other one?
Let me see.
Right before the strip.
Poor management of labor and delivery. Physicians are not knowing when to perform a C-section instead of.
And see, that's another thing. Them getting in to seeing you soon, so they'll know what's happening. But it's that actually goes as far as the whole team, the nurse and the doctor, OB doc. They need to be working in tandem. When you come in, you get triaged to see what's happening, and they put the monitor on you. When was your last ultrasound, if you were expected or not expected? So at least you can kind of know where to go, because there have been times people have had babies in hospitals that they didn't set up and plan to have them in, and didn't have access to records quickly. But there's some core things that working as a team that needs to be done together, so that you're watching both sides of the coin. The doctors, everybody's covering everybody, so that way the best outcomes for that baby and that mother. Doctors should know if you're high risk. Hey, as much as people want to have home births now, which I advocate, because the outcomes are getting a little bit better with them than some of the other stuff. Or birthing centers or wherever, have these conversations early. What is your birthing plan? That's why I'm trying to encourage women and as well as men. Now they're becoming doulas so that they know what their options are. It used to be a time in history that whatever the doctor said, we as a people used to deem that was the best course of action for us. Not anymore, because medicine has evolved from those times of the midwife coming out to your house and you having the baby on the floor, and where one woman took care and birthed all the babies in the whole county. Medicine has evolved. We have monitoring situations and stuff now, so we should be knowing what the situations are. If we're high risk, are we resting, where we're eating, are we doing what is need to be done? Yes, we had babies that seemed to turned out a little bit better during COVID, because the mothers were at home on bed rest, or they were taking better, because it wasn't like we running around trying to work and doing 11 different things. Hey, Bree, I'm glad. I was going to see if she wanted to come up here too, because she's having some good comments.
So we have about 40 minutes left, and I want to go over quite a few more stuff with you guys before we wrap up. But if we need to do a part 2, I am so interested in doing that and us going through with that. Welcome to the platform, Bree. I wanted to ask before, Bree, tells us about her perspective. So what I'm hearing is that, hell, it almost seems as though civilians also need to reasonably be as educated as possible themselves so that they can discern and understand when something is missing from their care. Because if we have been up to this point blindly trusting in our medical providers and our doctors blindly and just leaning on them for understanding and having this expectation that they are completely competent, etc., and taking everything at face value, that really isn't doing a big service, especially to Black and brown people in this system. So would you guys strongly advocate for civilians to also be like as educated as possible as it relates to pregnancy, as it relates to just healthcare, as it relates to their own health issues, etc., procedures, etc.? Because it seemed like we almost at this point need to know as much as the damn doctors do so that we can have a check and balance and know, okay, no, this isn't right, or why didn't you do this? But if I'm not even educated on what's supposed to be happening here today, then I don't even know that you didn't do something that technically you should have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Absolutely. That's why I said first aid classes with Red Cross, bystander CPR with American Heart Association, stuff like that. At least if you get some understanding of something that you can do immediate to save somebody's life, that adds time on the clock for them to get the necessary services that they need. But when you don't know nothing and nobody's around to help and everybody is panicking, time is brain, time is heart, time is gut, time is lungs, time is everything now. And we do need to be our own advocates. We have to have, just if it's nothing but a general knowledge base. If I got appendicitis, or what does it feel like? You were hurt in this area. You don't wait 2 and 3 days later. I had a young man that recently, before I lost my job, needed eons of antibiotics because he had an undiagnosed ear infection that he kept putting off until it got infected in the bone behind his ear. And he got really sick, and it infected the nerve endings in the bones as well as in his neck. He ended up on weeks of antibiotics, septic, from an ear infection.
Wow. That is
when your body is telling you that it's pain or something is swollen and there's discomfort, something is wrong. Get it looked at.
Yeah. Get it looked at. Absolutely. Okay. Bree and Sin, I want to read you guys this. This is from NBCnews.com. It seemed as though they also had some other doctors to weigh in on this particular incident with Jessica Ross. Doctors weigh in on decapitation of Georgia couple's baby. A Georgia couple filed a lawsuit last week alleging their child was decapitated during delivery by a doctor who used too much force. Jessica Ross and Treveon Taylor Sr. are suing both the Southern Regional Medical Center in Riverdale and their obstetrician, Dr. Tracey St. Julian, who is not employed by the hospital after she allegedly applied ridiculously excessive force trying to deliver the baby with shoulders dystocia.
Dystocia.
According to their attorney, Roderick Edmond, the infant did not survive. According to the lawsuit, Ross' water broke around 10 a.m. on July 9th, and she arrived at the hospital 10 minutes later. By 8:40 p.m., Ross was fully dilated and was instructed to push. However, the baby did not properly descend, the lawsuit says, most likely because of shoulder dystocia, which occurs when a baby's shoulder gets stuck behind the mother's pubic bone. Premier Woman's OBGYN St. Julian's practice did not immediately reply to requests for comment. Southern Regional Medical Center said in a statement that it denies the allegations of wrongdoing and that the unfortunate infant death occurred in the utero prior to the delivery and decapitation. The hospital also said it voluntarily reported the death to the Clayton County Medical Examiner's Office and is cooperating with all investigations. The lawsuit says the couple were discouraged from getting an autopsy. Shoulder dystocia occurs in roughly 3% of vaginal deliveries, and it typically happens to women who have reached full term, said Dr. Carrie King, an OBGYN in Illinois, who is not involved in the case. Risk factors for babies experiencing shoulder dystocia include the mothers having diabetes or being short in stature, which you also touched on, Cynthia, in the beginning. A Ross 20 had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in July 2022, and her pregnancy was considered high risk, the suit says. Another risk factor for shoulder dystocia would be whether the baby weighs more than 4,000 grams or 8 pounds, 13 ounces. According to the lawsuit, Ross' baby weighed 7 pounds, 6 ounces upon delivery. While doctors are able to point out possible risk factors, shoulder dystocia is not something that we can fully predict, King said, which Bree also spoke about from the chat. Edmund, the couple's attorney, said nurses and other healthcare providers in the hospital should have had protocols to deal with the problem. According to the lawsuit, both St. Julian and nurses did not meet the standards of care. King said that in her deliveries, risk factors like diabetes and a larger baby would typically prompt her to offer a couple a primary C-section with a goal of ideally preventing a shoulder dystocia, as per guidelines set up by the American College of Obstetricians and
obstetrician, was it gynecologist?
And gynecologist. Thank you. Dr. Joy Creer Perry, an OBGYN and founder of the National Birth Equity Collaborative, said that even in the moment, the doctor, the nurses, and other staff members should have agreed that the patient was deserving of a C-section. Creer Perry and King were not involved in Ross medical care. Ross and Taylor, 21, asked for a cesarean section while the baby was viable, Edmund said at a news conference last week, reiterating the allegations in the couple's suit. Instead, Ross pushed for 3 hours without delivering her baby, the suit says, and St. Julian tried to deliver it vaginally using different methods, one of which included applying traction to the baby's head. According to the lawsuit.
No, when you said traction,
It's a vacuum. Yeah, they use the vacuum. But I'm gonna let you. I was like, I have a lot to say about this part.
No, I'm gonna let you go ahead and talk, Bree, because I figured that's something that was gonna come out in the wash.
Yeah. According to the lawsuit, the fetal monitor showed an abnormal fetal heartbeat starting at 9:26 p.m. and the heart rate continued to decrease until 10:36 p.m., which we also were touching on, ironically. There was no sign of a fetal heartbeat on the monitoring strips by the time St. Julian performed an emergency C-section at 11:49 p.m. The lawsuit says the baby's body was delivered at 12:11 a.m. St. Julian's alleged tremendously excessive tension traction on the head and neck of Ross' baby, named Treveon Isaiah Jr., resulted in multiple skull and facial bone fractures and hemorrhaging on his neck and brain and around his spinal cord, according to the suit. Shreer Perry said that she used instruments like forceps and vacuums to help patients with the pushing, but that if they prove unsuccessful, C-sections are ordered. In 2020, the infant mortality rate during delivery in the U.S. was 5.4 deaths for every 1,000. Okay, all right. But a lot of that, while the way Ross' baby died is incredibly rare, they can happen, but they don't typically, King said. The family is seeking an undisclosed amount in damages for the baby's life, along with Ross's physical, mental, and emotional pain and suffering, according to the suit. Since the incident, Edmund said that she said that the couple have been in bad shape and are attending counseling because they have been psychologically traumatized. Millicent Rose, a trauma specialist and professor of clinical psychology of Pepperdine University, said, with medical trauma, we're really mindful that one of the things that can compound onto symptoms is when we know that it could have been preventable. It occurs due to negligence or at the hands of another person. The hospital said in the statement that it is unable to discuss the care and treatment of the specific patients because of patient privacy laws. Holding a child after birth is a rite of passage for any mother, Rose said. Robbing mothers of the opportunity after loss can cause prolonged grief. The central nervous system interaction between mother and child is also necessary for the mother's healing, regardless of whether the child survived birth. She added, the couple said in the lawsuit that they were unable to hold their baby. The hospital did not address why in its statement. Rose said that despite the intense grief, bereaved parents may feel she has witnessed families continue their journey to family planning while learning to balance their love for children who are no longer with them. Grief is all the love that you have to give somebody that you now have nowhere to put it, Rose said. So for a lot of mothers, when they experience pregnancy, infant or child loss, that overwhelming feeling of love to give another child becomes centered as well. I always encourage mothers to hold on to hope even after something catastrophic. So, man, this is completely nuts. Bree, have at it.
Yeah. Okay, so before I say this, like, I'm gonna kind of explain some of the things that are like expected, but also just realize I'm not defending this doctor because she definitely dropped the ball. Like,
yes, she did
at some point. So, with the shoulder dystocia, okay, I was a labor and delivery nurse. I actually worked in Atlanta for Emory Hospital for years, and I was a charge nurse when I retired. I did a lot of travel nursing. I've done quality control protocols. I've worked on hemorrhage protocols. I presented at conferences. I've done research and had peer review articles published. So that's my background.
Go ahead on, girl.
Okay.
Before I start. In a shoulder dystocia, it's not something that you typically would respond with a C-section for. It's something you cannot know until the baby's head comes out. Mm-hmm. There are sometimes signs that there may be one, and we kind of prepare to do maneuvers. Okay, so what I'm hearing from the story, there's a few things that are kind of concerning, but for a first-time mom, her baby was 7 pounds 6 ounces, I heard. So it's not a big baby. That's not a big baby. She had diabetes, so we would be like, okay, maybe her baby is big. Her water broke. She was 37 weeks. So we wouldn't typically do a fetal weight scan, especially if she was attending all her appointments. She would have been being scanned leading up to delivery. So we would check to make sure baby was head down, just do a quick scan, especially if her water broke on its own, right? We're not inducing her. So they wouldn't have necessarily looked at to see how big the baby is. And they're very inaccurate at the very end as well. They're off by a pound, too little, too much. So they're not really accurate. So it's something you would have been getting done like along the way because it's more accurate early on. So her water broke. She labored, sounds like a normal amount of time. So for first time moms, they can push up to 4 hours, especially if they have an epidural. So with her asking for a C-section, I'm curious to know why she asked, because I've had a lot of moms ask for a C-section after pushing for 2 hours, because a lot of them are like, it should have came out by now. A lot of people think you just push a few times and the baby comes out, and that's just not the case. Especially if you're first time, you don't really know how to push well. If your epidural is too heavy, it's really tiring to push for 3 or 4 hours. So a lot of moms ask for C-sections at that point. Now, considering that she had diabetes, she had been pushed that long, depending on how much baby was moving, it's just hard to know why the doctor said no. I've seen doctors tell first-time moms, I don't want to section you. It's best to have a vaginal delivery because once you get a C-section, you always have to get a C-section. Diabetic patients don't heal well. Also, so you're not like, I'm going to section you. It's still a major surgery. So I would need to know why she asked and why the doctor said no, because a lot of times they do ask, but the doctor will explain that and they'll say, okay, we'll keep trying. So it sounds like about 3 hours of pushing. It sounds like maybe they attempted a vacuum. Also would like to know where the baby's head was when they put the vacuum on, but it was a successful vacuum because the baby's head came out. So the goal of the vacuum is to get the baby head out. Once the head comes out, you take the vacuum off. Okay. Now, when they're pulling these babies' heads, I'm gonna tell y'all, they use a lot of force.
Let me tell you something. Before you go any further, Bree, over the years, we've seen like the way that doctors like will smack the baby's butt. Like a lot of people have been like, "Girl, like." They are really rough, period, when it comes to these babies.
It's rough. Yes, like they be pulling. Like I've seen doctors shaking, like sweating, like pulling. So with the vacuum, as the nurse, I'm watching to see if it pops off. Is the baby descending? Also, a hospitalist should have been in the room, which it sounds like maybe there wasn't one. Anytime you're using a vacuum, a hospitalist is another doctor who is staffed by the hospital, who is always there. And anytime you're doing a complicated delivery, which a vacuum is, you would call the hospitalist, okay, to be in there as well. Because if the vacuum doesn't work, you go for a C-section.
Now, let me ask you this question. The fact that she's not employed there, does that imply that they were short of staff and they had to bring in a doctor from elsewhere to deliver this? No. Okay.
That's normal. OBs aren't staffed by the hospital. They are contract workers. So she's not an employee of the hospital, which actually kind of works for us because I have to advocate for my patient. So if I worked for the doctor, there's like some power issues there. So they're not actually employees of the hospital. The hospitalist is, but not the OBs. Yeah, they just have contracts. That's what we say when they have privileges. That means they're contracts. So that's just the hospital trying to escape fault by saying that, because it's almost moot. Like all OBs, most OBs are contracted with the hospital. They're not employees of the hospital. So it's kind of a moot point. Right. So for them to say it, that's just them trying to legally get out of being held liable.
Absolutely. Now, do you see any wrongdoing here, aside from the concealment, of course, which is
up to this point, no. I'm assuming it was just a really bad shoulder dystocia. Like, yeah, she could have given that lady her C-section because she was pushing a long time. She was diabetic, she was short, but she probably had gathered that maybe the baby wasn't that big and she really just thought mom could do it. And so maybe this was a complete shoulder dystocia. Their shoulders are really scary. They're just crazy. And the maneuvers you have to do them so fast. A lot of people panic, and babies are slippery. So even the maneuvers seem very cut and dry when you look at them, but in real life, it's very hard. So you would just go through all these maneuvers. And what my assumption would be, without having details, is they tried Nick Roberts. They tried the ones you do. I see that the baby lost a heart rate at 10:36. So I'm thinking, okay, the head came out. We don't know when the head came out. Sometimes the baby's heart rate the strip will be like not great if the baby's head is almost going to come out, right? Okay. So it would depend on how bad the strip was. Like, was it a category 2 or 3? Was it some deep variables? How low were they? How long were they? Like, there's a lot that you have to say it was a bad strip. We just don't know what that means. Because most babies, when they're about to come out, it's like bad strip. But they come out and then it's over, right? But the main thing I'm concerned about is that the baby lost tones at 10:36. She didn't go to a C-section until 11:49. So my thought is she knew the moment she killed the baby. Because if the baby lost tones, in my experience, we going for stat, right? Because we think we could save the baby. If that didn't happen, she knew for some reason she couldn't save the baby. And even Zavanelli's maneuver is not really to save the baby, because if you're doing Zavanelli's, you're like, this baby's probably not going to make it. It's more for mom.
She definitely knew, because in the article it says there was an abnormal fetal heartbeat starting at 9:26. The heart rate continued to decrease until 10:36, and then there was no sign at all of a fetal heartbeat on the monitoring strip by the time St. Julian performed an emergency C-section.
That was at 11:30. That was like 11:40, so that was an hour and change later.
Right, that's a couple of hours, because wasn't in the article she got there at 8:30 and
she started pushing. She started pushing, so the
tone was lost an hour later.
2 hours. So that's what I'm thinking. Like, for me, my thought is the doctor knew whatever she was doing killed the baby, because most doctors, if the category is going to a category 3 strip, which is the worst, it's just going down, it's going down. Most doctors are like, let's call it, let's go. If they think they can save the baby, if it's a matter of saving the baby, it's not something that you just sit on. You're like, let's go, right? So the fact that we lost tones and you didn't immediately go to the OR, that sounds like she knew it was something she did that the baby passed away.
Damn.
Because I've seen babies who passed away in utero, right? But we didn't, like, we lost tones in the room. But sometimes, depending on how you're monitoring the baby, you're like, oh, have we really lost the baby or not? Who cares? Let's go to the OR, get this baby out. We'll figure it out there. Right. So to even still, there's just no reason why you would be going to a C-section an hour and 10 minutes later after you lost tones, unless you know the moment the baby died, right? Like, that's the only thing that makes sense.
So let me be clear. This baby head was actually detached. It was ripped from the body. So at what point did she rip the baby head from the body?
This is gonna sound terrible. So y'all, if you like, if she know the baby died at 10:30, this baby has passed. By the time they went to the OR, this wasn't to
where you're going, Bray.
Yeah, this wasn't to save the baby. They're not in the OR to save the baby.
Wow.
At this point, right? Now, you know, you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
They have to put the head back in, because once the head is out, you cannot pull the baby from above, right?
Yeah.
So that's what Zavanelli's is. You would push the baby back in. It's not easy to push the baby back in.
No,
but you would push. Yeah, you would push the baby head. So you got to kind of push it. So think of all these hours you're pushing. You're trying to get the baby through these bones. You got to push this baby's head back in, which is not made to go that way. So you tuck the baby's chin. You kind of do like a rotation to kind of do the rotation they do when they come out, and you push it back up, right? So, and now it's still very low. It's in the vaginal canal. C-sections with a baby who hasn't even come out of zero station can be hard. And when I say zero station, that means the baby's head hasn't passed through those bones at all. That could be hard. So imagine this baby's head is in the vaginal canal. So yeah, I think it was done on purpose to get
but
the
you're
baby
saying
out.
that it was done in the context, though, of just completing of the journey and the process.
Saving, and mom's probably hemorrhaging at this point, I'm assuming. So I would be surprised if she didn't hemorrhage. So because just because some of the maneuvers require you to cut, and it's just a lot. And so I'm assuming she's probably hemorrhaging, limp baby. Like I think it was done on purpose to get the baby out.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because like I said, the reviews for this doctor are really, really, really stellar prior to this particular incident, of course. She has a lot of great reviews. So I'm assuming that there was no ill intention here. So I had asked Sin this earlier too. Like, so at what point does the doctor inform the mother that the baby has died? Like, the moment that the doctor knows that, does the doctor then communicate that to the birthing?
I saw that the doctor communicated, according to the medical examiner or whoever I saw, I was looking at it, and it says that at 5 a.m. she got out of the C-section at 3 a.m. or something like that. It was a 3-hour C-section, which is also concerning. So it was 3 hours. Yeah, that's a long time. So I'm thinking she was hemorrhaging. Like,
that's at this point, because lost that much, large quantity of blood. That would explain for that prolongation.
Yeah, and so the doctor came around 5 a.m., which kind of makes sense because she probably was under general anesthesia, so 2 hours recovery. Doctor came around at 5 a.m. and told the family that the baby died from the neck being broken.
Okay.
But she did not tell them what happened in the OR.
Right.
So in that case, I'm not sure. I'm not a doctor. I'm not sure what they have an obligation to actually communicate within a certain amount of time.
Right. It seems to me, because they were saying how it was the funeral home that once they got these remains, that the head and the body was detached. So they must have just said the general, the baby died from prolonged and protracted labor and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, she told him she broke his neck. Right.
Okay, so it did say that. Okay.
Yeah, they said she told them she broke the baby neck, but she didn't tell them anything else. So they didn't know the head was actually disconnected from the body. Now, that was according to what I was reading from, like, the medical examiner or something. Somebody was saying at 5 a.m. she did tell them she broke the baby neck, and that's what killed the baby.
Oh, that was actually after they had got informed by the funeral home. Then the doctor told them.
Then they should probably fessed up there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, from what I saw, she told them the baby's neck broke and that's how it died in utero, but she didn't tell them she detached the baby's head. And that's where I'm like, the hospital is they lose because
but she wasn't truthful in that.
She wasn't truthful. She didn't tell them, well, when I
did she have an obligation to do so? Or to your point, Bree, like if she like legally, I mean, she had to, of course, tell them that the baby passed and it passed because of but like, was she legally obligated to divulge every single aspect of the injuries and everything that occurred?
That's the part I don't know, but I feel like you should, as a decent human. Like,
okay, yeah, because I want to be clear though about the difference between legal obligation and a moral one, because a lot of things that we think are morally or ethically improper, we actually think are illegal, which are not. So that's why I was asking, like, you know, like, did she have a legal obligation to share every detail?
Maybe not, because like, okay, the only thing I would say no, maybe not. And now you do have if she did indeed go in at 5 a.m. and say, I broke the baby neck, that's how the baby died. That could have fulfilled her obligation to notify the family of a passing, which I feel like is a legal thing. I feel like I've seen that. Like, you have to notify the family at a reasonable time. This is an infant. Those are the guardians. So you would have to notify them. So if she told them that, that's filled, right? But I've seen patients have crazy C-sections with all kind of crazy stuff happen, and the doctor doesn't come by sometimes or doesn't tell them what happened. I've just seen people leave. Well, I work in labor and delivery, so I have them for 2 hours. So I've seen doctors just not even talk about it. And then around the time I was retiring, I had created a team that would go visit the moms in postpartum and kind of ask them, like, the ones who had hemorrhages, like, have the doctor come by. Do you know what happened? Do you know what we did and why we did it? And most of them would say no. So I don't think that there's anything that the doctor has to tell them, like, what they did. And also, it's not in my scope of practice to say what happened in the operating room. So I can't necessarily divulge that. So I don't really know.
So let me,
same for me. If we tell you that we've done all that we can, especially if you've been in there resuscitating a patient in the ER, we might not get into the specifics that the doctor cut something accidentally, or if we even know that at that point. But risk management usually will be the ones that will, you know, say, what did you say? Say this if you hadn't said nothing, or you know, that's murky water because we don't know, because it's not our duty to, other than to stand there with the doctor to support the family and whoever's affected by the loss. It's not for us to have that conversation.
Wow. So then it's possible that this doctor may not have been liable, and this might not necessarily fall within a wrongful death if she actually went through all the necessary protocols. Because in the last live that I did, we did go over another case in the UK, like somebody mentioned in the chat, where a similar incident happened, and the tribunal of professionals who were assessing the exact same situation with that particular nurse, they didn't find her to have been responsible per se. Like, it was just, it fit the standard of an accidental death, like everything that should have been administered and considered, etc., given the circumstances. It just permitted that, you know, it just ended up being what it is, despite all measures that were implemented. But from what I'm hearing from Bree, it sounds like Bree is also saying somewhat that this MD, she seemed to have operated within the professional guidelines and her assessment, I guess, of the situation, and the circumstances just didn't turn out.
Yeah, I think the smoking gun
with the timeline.
Right, the fetal strip is gonna be the smoking gun for me. Like, if I would see that strip, I need to see how bad was it at 9/26. Was it a category 2? Was it a category 3? Most doctors in their right mind, if you got a category 3 strip, you're going to go for a C-section. So that would be one spot where you probably could get her, depending on how bad, and the fact that the nurses, I mean, well, we get pulled into it all anyway. When people sue for negligence, you sue everybody, okay?
Yeah.
You sue everybody that, anybody, everybody get pulled in. But that would be the smoking gun if the strip was really bad. And also, why did, if the baby passed at 10:30, why was the C-section not called till 11:49, where you just in there really trying to get this baby out vaginally still to avoid cutting the mom? And if you still couldn't get the baby out, it probably was a complete shoulder dystocia, which is even more rare than a shoulder dystocia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
a lot of the audience seems to also be taken aback by just the seemingly cover up, the fact that the couple wasn't allowed to actually touch or hold the baby afterwards, the fact that they were encouraged to not get an autopsy done. How do y'all feel about those components of
if it was me, I would have been on that doctor ass. Like, okay, so she want to hold her baby. I'm gonna need you to come in here and like talk to her about what happened, because I have a job to make sure she agrees, and I get her process started. Like the demise has all this stuff you need to do and things you're supposed to do to help the mom. Chaplain needs to come. All these people need to come. You want them to hold their baby. So if I know her not having information is keeping her from holding this baby, or whatever, and I can't disclose what you did in the OR, you're gonna have to come talk to mom. Like, there's just no way, if I was her nurse.
Because I wonder how they explained that. Like, what was the reason?
They lied.
Like, how did they explain why they could not even hold the child? Like, what was I'm just curious to know what they exactly said to them to justify that.
That's what I want to know, because it's best practice for her to hold the baby.
Right.
So I don't know what they told her. That's where they're definitely going to get got, because y'all all, I mean, you had to have a neonatal team that was there. I don't know. But for me, that's where I definitely know there's no, you can't, I don't know. Like, if I was a nurse, it's just no way. I'm going to leave my shift, and I got to keep this alive. Like, oh, you didn't tell them the baby head off? Yeah, you're going to have to come back, sis. Like,
exactly. I just would not have been, I wouldn't have been okay with any of that, agreeing to that. I would have fought just like Bree. And Bree, I want to thank you because like I said, LND ain't my belly weight, other than the basic generalist stuff that you learn. But for you to be able to give us this level of, understanding and the complexity of it all, even I've learned something too. My concerns would be the timeline, when they lost tones, and Bree's understanding of the strip. What part of the process were they in where a C-section should have took place? Then once they finally got in there, what happened that it took so long? And I have my problems are with definitely not coming forward with the actual stories to get the grieving process started, and the timeline and the loss of tones. That's where I'm having the biggest problem with this.
Oh yeah, and then somebody else had stated, and they also had a recommended cremation. So this hospital was aware, like this staff and this MD was aware on some level that they this was somewhat intentional. Like, they had an awareness, like something was happening in the conscious of the staff that made them commit to this level of making sure that the couple couldn't get to the bottom line of
for the cremation thing. I know everybody's like, what? So
because it's compounded on top of the whole I can't hold the child, and then y'all are encouraging me not to get an autopsy, and then on top of that, you are also telling me to get a cremation. So it's like,
So we offer free cremations to families who have fetal demise. A lot of patients who don't have money for the burial services, right? Because you're coming in having a baby. You don't have money set aside to bury your child, because I'm not supposed to be burying a child. Hospitals usually offer free cremations for families who lose infants.
So that was protocol.
That is protocol.
Okay.
Issue is Well, one, you could say she didn't qualify for an autopsy because you could say, well, we know why the baby died, right? Doctor broke his neck. Doctor said that. We know why the baby died, so we wouldn't necessarily do an autopsy to discover what killed the baby.
Okay, so that also was protocol. Wow.
Yeah, so that could technically be protocol, but now the family is, because it was a full-term infant, here's where some problems are. I don't know how her labor nurse left her shift without calling the medical examiner. Because for a full-term demise, you call the medical examiner. You don't release that body for cremation. You can't release that body for cremation. You can't do that. So the parents would have had to give permission. They would have said, we don't want an autopsy. You can cremate the baby. But the nurse has a responsibility to call the medical examiner on her shift, if she was the nurse, to report the demise.
Right.
So I don't know how that didn't happen. So that is a problem. And two, any full-term baby, if the parents want an autopsy, they did an autopsy. It's full-term. But they could have just been saying that because, well, we know why the baby died. It's not like it came out still. This wasn't a stillbirth.
Right.
So we wouldn't just do an autopsy on a, because it's not a stillbirth, if that makes sense.
So just to think that all of this really can fall within protocol, but because the doctor did not disclose the detachment, that it has led, possibly, are you saying, to what could be a misunderstanding on the couple's behalf of like obviously from what you're saying, I can understand from the couple's perspective why it looks the way, because it looked the way that it looked, but from understanding how the inside out works, I'm like, well, I also,
it's not as much of a smoking gun. There were definitely failures still there. Like, how did this not get reported? And you pushing this cremation, like, we offer it, but to be like, y'all should get baby, like, that is weird. So I'm not gonna say that no, like there definitely was some energy there if you're like really pushing it, because usually it's just like in the handout. Like, usually I give it to the supportive person who's there with mom because she's lost a baby, she's overwhelmed. And then it's like in a folder, and it's like, this is the funeral home. You can call them for cremation or whatever, if you want to do that. But it's not something that we like, you should get the baby cremated. It's just information that's available. And it says, if you don't have the money, this is a service we offer. We don't push it. So if they were really pushing it, that's weird. And once again, how was this not reported to the medical examiner? That's also a fail.
Because all death has to be reported.
Exactly, especially a full-term baby. Now, if it's not full-term, that's different. But, yeah, this was a full-term baby. 37 weeks is full-term. Yeah.
So then it was some intentionality in the rollout of the aftermath.
Yeah, it was some energy there. Yeah. It was definitely some energy there. Now, I heard.
So why do you think that is, since to your point, the doctor could have, because, things like this, it does happen. It can happen to the best of physicians, etc. There's room for that to happen without it costing you your career. So why do you think the doctor just didn't divulge everything? Because she feels she didn't do anything wrong. She feels she followed through with protocol, and that just because this happened in and of itself doesn't determine her to have been of any type of a criminal negligence, etc.
Because I just generally believe victims, I'm just gonna say I don't really care what she had going on. I did hear that she did pass out and she had to get care. That's very traumatic for the staff as well. So, like, yes, it's crazy to see that. And if she had to make the decision to go ahead and separate in order to retrieve that baby, that's going to be traumatic. So maybe that did happen. You heard
the doctor passed out.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I can't say where but I worked in Atlanta.
But the talk is in the streets.
The talk is in the streets. Yeah. So I heard that, but for me, I'd be like, okay, sis, you in here laid out. Okay, so go ahead and tell the lady, and then you can go home and go see your therapist. I don't really know why she could have felt like she was sparing them gruesome details, but at the same time, you know they're going to have to eventually find out this information. So you just don't have that. You don't have the right to me to decide what you want to tell me. You tell them. She could have just not wanted to say that. She probably couldn't even say it herself because maybe she never had to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But girl, I don't really care what she got going on. I just feel like you gotta tell them.
You gotta tell them the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was wondering how was she handling that now, you know, with the fact that as soon as the baby expired and this is all that what she had to do to get that baby out, and then with the stuff that we're discussing today, I was wondering how did that weigh on her mental state in that moment, because I even said that she probably really was starting to panic and you know, adrenaline and emotions are running high, and then it would make sense that she ended up needing some care herself after that, because I know I couldn't have been in the room and saw that. And I'm not L&D like Bree. And Bree, like I said, I'm giving you your flowers, baby girl, because you know your shit.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just know cursory stuff. If a baby, they come into the ER and we have to deliver down there, the first person I called is call L&D, tell the first one, warm body, come on down, join the party.
That's how I feel about y'all in the ER. I'd be like, I love ER nurse because I couldn't do it. So
I love that organized chaos because crazy knows crazy.
Exactly. I mean, I think she probably. I've seen something like this. I've seen wild stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna say that it's traumatizing, right? I've seen something like this with forceps. It's traumatizing. So I'm not gonna hold you. I mean, it's very traumatizing.
Right.
And but I've always put my feelings aside because I have a duty to my patient.
Exactly. Because we're seasoned doesn't mean that these things don't affect us once we leave or even in the moment, but we have to set us aside to be there to take care of patients. Because I've seen some stuff where I've come home, I've cried, I've went to church and laid out on the altar. Yes.
Absolutely. Wow. Miki in the chat is saying that they told the parents that the autopsy was not covered. The black female OBGYN was an elitist, and that the hospital refusing an autopsy is definitely risk management.
But because they knew how the baby died, you wouldn't necessarily do an autopsy. It sounds like Dr. Julian knew when she killed. The neck breaking is what killed the baby. We have an exact time baby passed away. We saw this baby's head come out. We saw baby blinking and breathing, right? There's also a time limit. When baby comes out, the head is out now. They're breathing air, right? So the placenta, umbilical cord circulation system starts to shut down.
Right.
You have a very short time from when baby takes in that first breath to the placenta can supply them blood. So if you can't get that baby out in a certain amount of time, now you're on the clock, right? Like you might have 3 minutes, 4 minutes, same amount of time we can go without air. How long can you go without air? The baby's on that clock now as soon as the head comes out.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we wouldn't offer autopsy if we know that what caused the death.
What caused the death was,
We wouldn't cover it.
Purple says, I get that, but when she saw things weren't progressing, she should have called for a C-section. And then Ebony said, sorry if she intentionally decapitated the baby and completely falsified your malpractice. You deserve all bad things coming to you. So I guess that's what the question is. I'm not getting that the doctor had intention to decapitate a baby, especially in lieu of everything that Bree is saying in terms of like the aftermath. Once the baby's neck was broken and then they were struggling to get the rest of the body out, then one decision just led to another for the sake of completing the task, which I can understand that if that's the way that that's supposed to go, etc. But does anybody here believe that the doctor desired to kill this baby intentionally? That
No.
I don't think she did, but I think she, things got hairy quick and got in over her head, and it probably could have even been a level of panic there. And you know, you got to keep a level head, because panic, you'll start to, you know, you lose sense of time in the order that you need to be doing things, or how fast you need to be doing it. I always tell new nurses, get in the habit of keeping a running tab of time in your head. You know, sit in a room for 5 minutes without looking at a clock, so you know what 5 minutes feels like if there's not a clock in your eyesight. Just because it helps to, you know, because if you're not looking at a clock and you don't have that access, and in this case, time was of the essence, especially when this baby's head is out and you got so much time to deliver that whole body, and it doesn't happen. You got to know how I'm so good at it now. I can tell you how 5 minutes have passed without ever looking at a clock.
And you're running the paper in the labor room, which is a time.
Exactly.
You're running paper. So I always say, run your paper. As soon as that vacuum showed up, run the paper. Because that's going to keep track of time. You're going to have, I mean, it's going to be time. There's no way there's so many nurses in there. I think she panicked. As soon as McRoberts doesn't work, we panicking. Okay. I'm not even going to hold you. As soon as the first maneuver don't work, we panicking. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you still working, but by that time now you're considering, am I going to have to break a collarbone? Am I going to have to break an arm? That's what the doctor's considering.
Right.
So I would be curious to know, was the baby clavicle broke? Did she try that? Did she break the arm? What did she do? Because if McRoberts doesn't work, we lay the bed flat. We put your knees to your ears. Doctor try to turn the baby's shoulder a little bit from the inside.
I know I described it. I just didn't know the term for it. Okay.
Yeah. So when that doesn't work, everybody panicking, because now you're like, oh my God, this is a real complete shoulder to shoulder. Yeah.
To some people's point, is this doctor being called in to deliver, is that a contributing factor to the fact that Jessica Ross wasn't her personal patient? Could it have led to maybe some of the miscommunication and misunderstanding that took place in the room, such as Jessica eventually asking for a C-section, but the doctor just kind of making her own choice in that matter? And does a doctor have a legal obligation to adhere to the feedback of a patient, or can they assert their own expert choice over the patient?
In labor, you can get a second opinion. So like in that case, okay, so it didn't even sound like mom pushed 3 hours. If baby's baby's neck was broken at 10:36, I'm gonna say she pushed maybe an hour 30 minutes, hour 45 minutes. That's good. That's good pushing time. That's not a long time. So if, let's just say the patient was like, I want a C-section, maybe her epidural wasn't working. She was having a lot of breakthrough pain before she even started pushing it. She was like, you know what, this epidural ain't working, I want a C-section, right? I've seen that, right? And the doctor's like, well, it just doesn't make sense. And I've seen doctors be like, I am not doing a C-section, right? So at that point, I call in the hospitalist who is employed by the staff. I think this was actually her doctor. She's a high-risk OBGYN. She's been practicing for 27 years. So if that was the case, then we would bring in the hospitalist, who's another OB, and they would like kind of assess the situation and say what they would recommend as well. So yes, I've seen it where just because you ask, the doctor doesn't have to do it, especially if the baby's tones were fine, nothing was going on that is making us think you need a section. I've seen doctors say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not best practice, so they won't do it.
Wow. So last question before we wrap up. We're just going to have a part 2, because we didn't even get to really talking about just what's happening in general in the healthcare field and all of the predictions being made about how there are going to be less professionals in this field in the coming years, and there being like a shortage and all of that. But we'll get to that in a part 2 for sure. I would love to have you ladies back. But my final question to you all is, so what do y'all predict will be the outcome of this suit? Are y'all leaning more toward Jessica and her boyfriend's side, or does more of the reasonability and facts and, I guess, rightfulness of the situation lean on the medical doctor's side, in y'all's opinion?
I don't think it's going to fare well for the doctor if the strip, what's the smoking gun comes out that was where the C-section should have been stat immediate, boom, boom, boom. It's not going to be favorable for her.
Okay. And Bree?
Without more details of the case, if I just had to take it with what the information is right now, just I mean, of course, none of this was said, but this is just what I've gleaned from knowing the process. Like Cynthia just said, it's going to depend on what that strip said, and it's also going to depend on what her legal obligations are for disclosure. Did she fail there? And obviously, the nurses could be, because they didn't do best care by making sure mom got the bond with her baby. So I think there's some aspects where they could win. I honestly think the hospital will settle. Will try to settle. Yeah. Honestly,
it's probably what's probably going to happen, because it's too at this point they're going to want it to hurry up and go away.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what the lawyer kind of knew, because I think he practiced in the past, so he's probably like negligence. Negligence cases are hard to win. You have to prove like 3 things. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. You have to prove 3 things to win a negligence charge. They're very hard to win. And so I think the lawyer knew that, and I think it was very smart for him to just bring it out to the public, put the pressure on that hospital. That way, that family walks away with something, because in hearing what I've heard, depending on what their strip says, they might not win a negligence case.
Yeah.
But I think the hospital will settle, because this is just like terrible.
So final question. So if the hospital settles, what happens to Dr. Julian's license? Like, what will happen, like, in either direction? Like, if she was to be sued successfully, would that also result in the loss of her license?
No, not necessarily.
No? Okay.
She might lose privileges. It sounds like she's already lost privileges there, which is kind of standard. If it's like all the heat, they probably would stop her delivery in the meantime. But I worked on there was a psycho doctor that delivered at a hospital I worked at, and he was mutilating babies, and we were reporting him. People were suing him, and he's still practicing. He just doesn't practice as an OB. He lost his privileges to be an OB.
I think
you know, okay. I'm like, yeah.
As a matter of fact, he's doing something else, something.
He's doing plastic surgery and pain. Yep, you know the doctor.
Yep, I heard. Yep, I know what you're talking about.
I was in them deliveries. I was there. I done been in the court.
Been me.
Yep, I've
not
been
not with that fool. No.
I've been in my little sheath dress testifying. Look, I've been in front of risk management. Yep. And was reporting him
before on even my patient, my name, just because I sent the urine to the lab.
Yeah, and the thing is, we reported. I was reporting him. I mean, every shift we're reporting him. We're like telling people he's crazy. He's a psych. It was so hard for him to lose privileges. Like, that's the thing people don't understand.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all heard about is it Nurse Lucy? But she killed like over a span of like, I think a year or 2, maybe. She killed like 7 babies, and it was the same thing that you're talking about, Bree, where doctors and physicians and nurses were reporting this woman because like the deaths were so like out of nowhere, and then she was always on staff and in proximity when these babies would just stop breathing, and the overhead kept pretty much just citing it as coincidence, and even made the nurses and the doctors who were reporting Nurse Lucy write an apology letter to Nurse Lucy for all of the distress and slander that she was experiencing. I mean, it was like crazy.
Yeah, they said we were bullying him. Him.
Exactly. Only for it all to come out that she actually was unaliving these babies.
No, I know exactly who that Dr. Bree talking about. No, he was a son of a you know what.
Ooh, he was Satan incarnate, honey. I said, you must hate women.
I heard those stories. See, this is what I'm saying for us as clinicians in the field, and we talk amongst ourselves in our special sites. This is stuff that the public is not aware of. And these are the conversations that need to be had today.
Absolutely. Well, we have to wrap up, you guys. I have a live that I got to get to right
Yes,
after
you
this.
do, because I
This
got
was
to.
so amazing, Sin and Bree. We have to come back and do a part 2 for sure. So, are you following me on Instagram, Bree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Message me right after this so that I can just have so that I can see it, because I want to be able to coordinate another time and date with you and Sin to bring y'all back to get into a part 2 of this discussion and to go into some other areas as it
Yes.
relates to
Yes,
the
and
healthcare
Conscious,
system.
if you could share my number with Bree, because I want to keep in contact with her.
Okay, I
Yes.
will. Okay, I will send her your number, and I'll send her your IG page as well, so she can follow.
Yes, do that
follow each
so
other.
we can keep in
Yes.
contact.
This is I love the Conscious crew.
Yeah.
So amazing. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me. It
Yes.
was nice meeting you,
Bree,
Cynthia.
Nice
Is
meeting
it-
you, Bree.
is there any place like, do you want to tell people
I
they can
mean,
find you, or
I
you
just
want the
be,
logo?
look, well, you know my main channel. I be talking about anime and gaming. I don't be talking about this stuff.
Okay, that's fine.
But I have Kawaii Bree Can't Relate, which I did talk about this, but I think I had to take the stream down because the signal was so bad. So I do talk about random stuff like this, and I've talked about previous birthing incidents over there on Kawaii Bree Can't Relate. So.
Okay, nice. I'm gonna put all of Bree's links in the description box, you guys. So be looking for that. Thank you, ladies, so much. I love y'all down. I'm gonna be contacting y'all before the day is out so we can coordinate another time and date to come back up here and do this.
Okay.
But thank y'all for y'all care, y'all knowledge. Thank y'all for everything.
No problem.
You
Bye.
That was Bree and Alison, you guys. This was absolutely amazing. Shout out to the Conscious crew members, honey, for being in the world and being educated as hell. We got followers from all walks of life, baby, from the medical field, the psychology field, the lawyer field, honey, everything. Wow. So as Bree and Sin said, we're going to be looking to see how this plays out. Obviously, more details will more than likely be divulged in order for us to really assess the situation better. We got a lot of information about how things work from the inside. Like Andrew said, had no idea that some of the things that to us, the public, look very negligent or look a certain way actually are a protocol within the system. So this is why talking to people who work in these fields is so significant, because that was very like enlightening. Wow. So but much love to this young couple. I can only imagine what they're going through. They are in counseling due to this trauma. I'm sure this compounds the grieving experience. So light and love to Jessica Ross and Treveon. And once again, I'll be keeping you guys updated on all other aspects of this case as this lawsuit plays out, etc. And I will be bringing Cynthia and Bree back to the platform to get into some more conversation about the healthcare field and healthcare providers and being Black and brown and being woman, etc. As it relates to the healthcare system and everything that it's got going on, girl, because they got it going on. Okay. We're about to roll over into another live stream and get into some Larry Reed stuff, girl. So make sure y'all roll over, thumbs up. Make sure you thumbs up this video on your way out. Replay gang, please thumbs up, share the content, tell a friend of a friend of a friend. And all donation information, of course, is in the description box. You guys know that we're working. And I'll see you guys in a few. Bye.